My name is Emma Wilson, and at 24, I never imagined that my college graduation would become the most satisfying moment of revenge. Standing next to my sister Lily in our matching caps and gowns was supposed to feel like a celebration, but years of being treated unfairly had led to this day. I can still hear the sharp words in my mind. She earned it. You didn't. I will never forget that night, when my parents made it clear that only my sister was worth supporting. Before I explain what caused my parents to go pale during graduation, comment below where you are watching from, and hit the like button if you have ever had to work twice as hard for something others were handed easily. I was raised in what looked like a typical middle-class household in suburban Michigan. Our two-story home with its white fence looked picture-perfect from the outside, and the family photos showed forced smiles that masked the truth behind them. My father, Robert Wilson, worked as an accountant, and my mother, Diana, taught English at the local high school. We weren't rich, but we lived comfortably enough that money issues shouldn't have been in my future. My younger sister Lily was 2 years behind me in age, but somehow always seemed ahead in our parents' eyes. With her flawless blonde curls, her effortless school achievements, and her natural charm, she embodied everything they admired. From the start, the pattern was obvious. Lily was the favorite and I was just there. I still remember the Christmas mornings when Lily opened expensive gifts while I got things like socks or clearance craft supplies. Your sister needs more encouragement because of her talents, Mom would say whenever I questioned the difference. Even as an 8-year-old, I knew it wasn't fair, but I learned to keep quiet. School made the difference in treatment even clearer. Both parents took off work to help Lily prepare for her science fairs with detailed projects. For my art exhibits, I was lucky if Mom stopped by for 15 minutes on her lunch break. Art is just a hobby, Emma. It won't lead anywhere, Dad would say without much thought. The only one who truly saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor. Each summer when we visited her lake house, she would sit with me for hours while I sketched trees and water. You see the world in a beautiful way, Emma, she would say. Don't let anyone take that from you. Those summers became my escape. Her small library introduced me to stories of entrepreneurs and leaders who overcame hardships. That was when my dreams started. Dreams of making something of myself that my parents couldn't ignore. By high school, I had learned how to be tough. I joined every business club I could find and excelled in math and economics. Even my teachers were surprised by my talent. When I won the regional business plan contest in 10th grade, my economics teacher, Mr. Rivera, personally called my parents. That's nice, Mom said after ending the call. Did you help Lily with her history project yet? It's due tomorrow. In junior year, I worked part-time at a nearby coffee shop to save money knowing I'd need it. I kept a 4.0 GPA despite working 20 hours a week. Meanwhile, Lily joined the debate team and quickly became the star. My parents attended every competition and treated each win like a major holiday. By senior year, both Lily and I were applying to college. Even though we were 2 years apart, Lily had skipped a grade, so we were graduating together. We both applied to Westfield University, a top-tier school for business and political science. Somehow, we both got accepted, and on the same day, I still remember my hands shaking as I opened the thick envelope. I got in, I told everyone at dinner, bursting with happiness. Business program fully accepted. My father looked up from his phone for only a moment. That's nice, Emma, he said. Just minutes later, Lily came bursting into the house, waving her acceptance letter high in the air. I got into Westfield's political science program, she shouted. The change in my parents' behavior was instant. Dad jumped from his seat and Mom ran to hug her. In a matter of seconds, dinner was forgotten and replaced with a spontaneous celebration: champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for us. We always knew you'd make it, Mom said with glowing pride, focused entirely on Lily, conveniently ignoring that I had announced the exact same news just moments before. 2 weeks later came a conversation that would forever alter my relationship with them. We were all gathered around the dinner table, one of those rare nights when phones were put away and everyone was present. We need to talk about college, Dad said, lacing his fingers together, but his eyes were fixed only on Lily. We've been saving for your education since the day you were born, he continued. Westfield is expensive, but we've got you covered. You can study without worrying about tuition or living costs. Lily smiled brightly while I sat there, assuming the same would apply to me. I waited. Nothing. The silence became unbearable until I finally spoke. What about my tuition? I asked quietly. The air seemed to freeze as my parents exchanged awkward looks. Emma, Dad said slowly. We only saved enough for one of you, and Lily has always been more academically focused. We believe that putting money into her education will bring a better return. Mom reached out and touched my hand as if trying to soften the blow. You've always been the more independent one. You can apply for loans or maybe look into a community college. That phrase, community college, cut deep. The words that followed were carved into my memory forever. She deserved it. You didn't. I stared at them, completely unable to absorb the weight of what they were saying. All the times they had overlooked me, dismissed my efforts, none of it had prepared me for this moment. The rejection was final. The thin, fragile thread holding my hope together snapped completely. That night, after that crushing dinner, I locked myself in my room and let the tears fall. The weight of it all pressed down on me. 17 years of trying to win their approval, only to be told clearly and painfully that it was never going to be enough. My perfect GPA, the awards, the business competition victories, none of it mattered to them. I wasn't enough, and maybe I never would be. The next morning, swollen-eyed and drained, I faced them in the kitchen. How could you save for Lily and not for me? I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Mom stirred her coffee and sighed. Emma, these things aren't simple. We had to make smart decisions, based on what we had. But I have better grades than Lily, I said. I've worked 2 jobs for years and still kept my GPA perfect. How does that not show commitment? Dad snapped his newspaper shut. Lily has always been focused on academics. You've been too involved in side interests and that job of yours. Besides, her career goals are clear. Your business plans are uncertain. You never even asked about what I wanted to do, I said under my breath. Look, Mom said quickly, we can help you fill out the loan paperwork. A lot of students pay for college on their own. And that was it. The discussion was over before it began. Their minds were made up. In their eyes, I didn't measure up. I wasn't worth the same investment. That weekend, I drove 2 hours to visit my grandmother, the only person who had ever truly seen me. As I poured my heart out to her, telling her everything, she listened without saying a word, her aging hands wrapped tightly around mine. My sweet girl, she finally said, wiping my tears. Sometimes the worst pain we feel becomes the push we need. Your parents don't see your worth, but I do, and you have something they never will. Unshakable willpower. She didn't have money to offer. Her small pension barely covered her own bills. Her modest pension barely covered her day-to-day needs. But what she offered me was far more meaningful. Unshakable faith in who I could become. Promise me you'll go to Westfield anyway, she said with a fiery determination in her eye. Do not let their limits define your own. That night, I made up my mind. I would attend Westfield right alongside Lily. I would fund my own education and push through every barrier that came my way. By the next morning, I had already started hunting for scholarships, grants, student loans and work-study opportunities. For the next few weeks, I filled out applications during every free moment I had. My school counselor, Miss Chen, stayed late after hours just to help me understand the complicated financial aid system. It's rare to see this level of drive, she said while we hit submit on my 25th scholarship. I managed to win a handful of small awards, but they barely made a dent in Westfield's hefty tuition bill. With a mix of federal aid and private loans, with Grandma Eleanor bravely signing on as my co-signer, I managed to scrape together just enough to pay for my first year. Next came the housing situation. While Lily would live in a luxurious dorm on campus, fully paid for by our parents, I found a tiny rundown apartment 45 minutes from the university. I would be sharing it with 3 strangers I found through a campus housing board. At the same time, I applied to every job near school I could find. 2 weeks before the semester started, I secured a job at a busy coffee shop close to my cheapest classrooms. I also grabbed weekend hours at a local bookstore. The differences between Lily's journey and mine were staggering. Our parents took her shopping for brand new clothes, the latest laptop, and fancy decorations for her dorm. They even helped her pack, hired professional movers, and threw a big goodbye party with friends and family. Meanwhile, I packed my own things into worn-out suitcases and old cardboard boxes collected from grocery stores. The night before I left, my mom quietly handed me some of her old twin-sized bedsheets. That was the only gesture that acknowledged I too was heading off to college. On move-in day, my parents loaded Lily's belongings into the family SUV and drove her to campus. I followed behind them in my rusty old Honda, the one that always needed coolant and made strange noises every time I hit the brake. No one had checked to see if my car could handle the 2-hour drive to my new life. When we got to the entrance of the university, our paths split. They drove Lily to her fancy dorm, while I continued alone to my far-off apartment. As they pulled away, Mom called out, "Good luck, Em. I hope things work out for you." The hesitation in her voice lit a fire in me. This wouldn't just work out. I would make sure it became something remarkable. But my new place was a far cry from inspiring. The paint was peeling, the plumbing was unreliable, and my roommates were total strangers. That first night, I lay on a thin mattress, listening to traffic and arguments through the paper-thin walls. Fatigue washed over me. The reality of what I was taking on hit hard. Could I really survive 30-hour workweeks and a full academic load? Would money stress ruin everything? Just as panic began to close in, my phone buzzed with a message from Grandma Eleanor. "Remember, my brave girl, diamonds form under pressure. You're already shining." I wiped my tears and got to work. I built a detailed schedule, blocking out every hour of the week. There would be almost no sleep, no social life. But I wasn't going to sacrifice my future. The financial aid office quickly became my go-to place on campus. Winters, the assistant director, heard about my situation and took a personal interest. "This is a huge responsibility," she said seriously, "but I've watched students like you succeed before. Just promise me you'll reach out before it gets too much." That promise would be a lifeline more than once. Then the day before classes began, I got a surprising call. Mrs. Chen, my high school counselor, had rallied the business department at my old school to put together a last-minute $1,000 scholarship just for me. "It's not a big amount," she said, apologizing, "but every teacher contributed. We believe in you, Emma." That moment, people choosing to back me simply because they saw what I could do, gave me the last bit of strength I needed to begin. As I carefully entered that hard-earned scholarship into my budget spreadsheet, I felt a shift deep within me. What had started as survival instinct was turning into ironclad resolve. Freshman year came at me like a storm. While most first-year students were adjusting to the rhythm of college and relishing their new independence, I was walking a tightrope. 30 hours of work each week, combined with a demanding load of business courses. My mornings began at 5, with 2 hours of studying before my early shift at the coffee shop. After class, I would head straight to my evening job at the bookstore, returning home well after midnight. Sleep became a rare luxury. I squeezed readings into bus rides, tackled homework during lunch breaks, and recorded lectures to replay while scrubbing espresso machines. Every hour was accounted for. Every dollar had a purpose. Meanwhile, Lily's experience looked like something out of a brochure. Through occasional texts and cheerful photos, I watched her enjoy campus events, sorority socials, travel workshops, and relaxing weekends at home with Mom's cooking. Back in my world, I was doing mental math to figure out if I could afford both my textbooks and groceries. But then something unexpected happened. Despite the constant grind, I wasn't just keeping up, I was thriving in my business classes. All those years of managing real-life finances and stretching pennies had given me a head start. While classmates fumbled through budgeting basics, I was applying those same concepts to my own situation daily. One day during my second month, Professor Bennett, who taught business ethics, pulled me aside. "Miss Wilson, your breakdown of the case study was outstanding, especially your take on family business strategy and how resources shape decision-making. Your perspective is unusually mature." For the first time, all my difficulties were giving me a distinct academic edge. The exhaustion remained, but now it was laced with growing confidence. During this period, something else remarkable happened. An unexpected friendship became a lifeline. My roommate Zoe began to notice the brutal pace I was operating under. One day, I opened the fridge to find a homemade meal labeled with my name. Another evening, I stumbled in after a particularly long day to find her waiting with a cup of tea in hand. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said, pushing the mug toward me. "You're going to burn out before midterm." When I shared the full picture with her, her expression shifted from worry to disbelief. "That's completely unfair," she said, clearly angry on my behalf. "From now on, I'm your college family," and she truly meant. Zoe edited my papers when I was too tired to think, made flashcards for my upcoming tests, and fiercely protected my study hours from other noisy roommates. When she found out I had been skipping meals to save money, She started cooking enough for both of us. She wouldn't accept a cent in return, just asked that I help her with her own assignments now and then. My parents raised me to believe that family means looking out for each other, she said, and sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into. Then, midway through sophomore year, the foundation I had built began to crack. The coffee shop cut everyone's hours due to a seasonal dip in business, slashing my income by almost 40%. My careful budgeting plan collapsed overnight. Rent was due, another tuition bill loomed, and I had no safety net. As panic set in, I remembered Miss Winters in the financial aid office, and scheduled an urgent meeting. She listened carefully as I explained everything. Then, she gave me not just guidance, but an opportunity. Your grades qualify you for an emergency grant, she explained. Also, Professor Bennett has recommended you for a research assistant position in the business school. It pays better than your coffee shop job and looks great on a resume. That offer changed everything. I began working alongside Professor Bennett on a study about how small businesses survive during economic downturns. The hours were flexible, fitting neatly between my classes, and the mental stimulation was a much-needed break from the monotony of customer service work. Even more meaningful than the job itself was the mentorship. Professor Bennett began showing a personal interest in my long-term goals. Have you ever thought about entrepreneurship? She asked one afternoon, while we reviewed survey results. Your understanding of how limited resources can drive creativity is incredibly advanced. Her words planted a deeper root in an idea I had been quietly nurturing since high school. Using what I had learned in my digital media and marketing classes, I began building a basic online service platform. It offered virtual assistant support for small local business. Most nights, I stayed up late, building a simple website and designing service packages, based on the real needs I had noticed during my research with her. By the start of junior year, that modest idea had become a source of steady income, enough for me to leave the bookstore job behind. I continued working with Professor Bennett, not so much for the pay but for the experience and her guidance. Between the money from my business, the research stipend and existing loans, I finally reached a fragile but workable level of financial stability. As my side hustle grew, so did my self-belief. In my business strategy course, I began contributing more during discussions, often using examples drawn from my real-world experience. Professors started to take notice. Even classmates began asking me for help with their own projects. The quiet girl no one used to notice was now becoming a respected voice in the business department. My relationship with Lily stayed polite but distant. She sometimes invited me to sorority mixers or campus events, but I rarely had time. Between work and studies I always had a full plate. We never spoke about how different our college lives were. We kept things shallow, just like we had growing up. Our parents still called Lily weekly. They contacted me only for big holidays or emergencies. One Thanksgiving, I couldn't afford the trip home. All I got was a text from Mom. We miss you at dinner, but understand you're busy with your projects. The ellipsis said everything. They still saw my life as a distraction rather than a valid path. Even so, my academic performance was becoming impossible to I was on the dean's list every term, won awards from the department, and was chosen to present at a respected business conference. Each new recognition made me more determined to prove that my journey was every bit as valid, maybe even more meaningful than Lily. By the end of junior year, my small virtual assistant company had grown into a full-service digital marketing agency. I was serving clients across the state, and had hired 2 business students as part-time staff. I was finally turning the theories from class into actual business growth. The company covered all my living expenses and even brought in enough to start paying off a few of my smaller student loans. Then came the biggest breakthrough yet. Professor Bennett nominated me for the prestigious Entrepreneurial Excellence Scholarship. It covered my entire senior year's tuition. You earned this through sheer dedication, she told me when I received the award. Your journey reflects the exact kind of entrepreneurial spirit this school was founded to promote. For the first time since arriving at college, I felt the heavy burden of financial uncertainty begin to lift. That dream I had once formed at Grandma Eleanor's lake house, the one that always seemed just out of reach, was slowly becoming reality, thanks to my own grit. What I didn't know was that people across the department had started paying attention. While I was busy surviving and building, a reputation was forming, one that would take me somewhere I hadn't yet imagined. When senior year began, I hit the ground running. My marketing agency had expanded to 15 steady clients and now employed 4 part-time student workers. We were even featured in a regional business magazine, which brought in more clients and built my professional name beyond the university. Academically, I had reached the top tier of my business class. Then in October, Professor Bennett brought me yet another opportunity. She slid a brochure across her desk and smiled. The National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition is accepting applications. She tapped the headline, "Top prize $50,000 in funding and national exposure. I think your agency, with its focus on supporting rural small businesses, has a real chance at winning," Professor Bennett said. Under her guidance, I spent weeks sharpening my business proposal, perfecting financial forecasts, and rehearsing my presentation. After 3 competitive rounds, I advanced to the final stage, scheduled for April, just a month before graduation. Ironically, as my career momentum reached new heights, Lily hit her first real academic wall. Her political science program's senior thesis proved more than she was prepared for. Years of relying on talent and constant encouragement from our parents hadn't taught her how to face a demanding, high-stakes project alone. One Tuesday evening in November, I heard an unexpected knock on my apartment door. There stood Lily, teary-eyed, holding her laptop and a chaotic stack of papers. "I'm failing," she blurted. "My thesis seminar. Professor Goldstein says my entire research method is flawed. I've got 3 weeks to rebuild it, or I won't graduate." I stared at her, stunned. Part of me, the part still sore from years of being overlooked, felt like this was justice finally served. But another part of me saw this moment as something else. A chance to rise above all the old wounds. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "Let's go through it together." That evening turned into the first of many late-night work sessions. As I walked her through research structure and source analysis, I realized just how much my self-taught habits and strict time management had developed into real expertise, skills Lily had never needed to build. My experience with Professor Bennett's research project became a key asset in helping her understand proper methodology, and something else shifted between us. We started talking, really talking, for the first time in years. "How do you do it all?" Lily asked one night as we took a break. "Your business, your grades, research, how are you keeping up?" I told her everything. The long work hours, the constant stress of money, the way every minute of my life had to be accounted for just to survive. She sat quietly, the weight of my words sinking. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Mom and Dad always said you were doing okay." "Okay is relative," I said. "For 4 years I've been working 60 hours a week while carrying full course loads. I've skipped meals. I've slept on floors. I've missed every party. I've lived in survival mode. Why didn't you ever tell us?" she asked. I looked at her, not with anger but clarity. Would it have mattered? Would they have suddenly thought I was worth the same investment? That conversation became a turning point. Lily began to recognize just how uneven the playing field had always been between us. She started making quiet changes, refusing costly gifts from our parents, telling them she preferred to manage on her own, just like I had. By January, our study nights had turned into something more than shared academic goals. We had found a kind of honesty that had never existed between us before. Her thesis began to improve, and she started to develop something she had always lacked: a deeper appreciation for consistency, effort, and sacrifice. While that transformation was taking place, something unexpected happened in my world as well. The university took notice of my senior project. In February, Dean Rodriguez, the head of the business school, invited me into her office. She sat across from me and said, "Emma, your journey here has been remarkable. From putting yourself through college to building a successful business, while excelling academically, your story is exactly what we want to celebrate." She explained that each year, one graduating student is chosen to speak at the commencement ceremony on behalf of their school. "We'd like you to represent the business department this year," she continued. "You embody everything we hope our graduates become: resilient, innovative, and self-made." The idea of standing on that stage, delivering a speech in front of my classmates, professors, and most importantly my parents, felt like the moment I had waited for all my life. I accepted without hesitation. What I didn't realize at the time was that Dean Rodriguez had plans beyond just the speech. She didn't share the details, only that some surprises were in store for graduation day. As April drew near, the business competition became my entire world. I poured everything I had learned about grit,
creative resource management, and making value out of limitations into my final pitch. When the judges finally announced my name as the winner, the feeling went beyond the check or the headline. It was something deeper, a moment of confirmation that the very hardships I had endured had become my greatest strength. The university newspaper featured my story on its front page, with a photo of me accepting the giant check and holding the trophy. I mailed a copy to Grandma Eleanor. She called me, her voice choked with emotion. "I always knew you were something special," she said through happy tears. "Now the whole world does too." As expected, my parents said nothing, not about the article, not about the award. Their silence no longer surprised me.
2 weeks before graduation, they arrived in town, but not for me. They had rented a large home to host the extended family and were fully immersed in preparing Lily's celebration. A detailed post-ceremony party was being planned. I received a formal but clearly secondary invitation, more like an afterthought. "We assumed you'd be tied up with work," Mom said, when I asked about not being included in the pre-graduation family dinner. "But of course, you're welcome to come if you're free." It stung, but not the way it used to. By now, my value wasn't measured by their attention. I had stopped waiting for recognition from people who never bothered to look. The day before the ceremony, Grandma Eleanor arrived with something wrapped carefully in tissue. It was a custom-made graduation stole, embroidered with words that had carried me through my darkest hours. "Diamonds are made under pressure. Wear this proudly," she said, her eyes shimmering. "Every stitch is yours. You've earned all of it." That evening during rehearsal, Dean Rodriguez pulled me aside with a knowing grin. "Everything is set for tomorrow," she said softly. "Just expect a slightly longer introduction before your speech." When I asked what she meant, she simply smiled and said, "Some surprises are worth the wait." Later that night, our entire extended family gathered at a high-end restaurant downtown. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents crowded around joined tables, celebrating Lily's upcoming graduation. At the center, my parents were in full storytelling mode, sharing Lily's successes, her future plans, her bright path forward. Then finally my Uncle Jack spoke up. "What about Emma? I heard she just won a major business competition." My father chuckled lightly and waved it off. "Oh, Emma's been keeping herself busy with her little ventures. Very enterprising," he said with a tone that reeked of condescension. It was clear he still viewed my achievements as cute side hobbies, nothing more. Across the table, Lily met my eyes. She looked visibly uncomfortable. After dinner, Grandma Eleanor cornered my parents in the lobby. I couldn't hear what was said, but I could read the body language. Her firm stance, my dad's crossed arms, and my mom's flushed expression told me everything. She was holding them accountable in a way no one else ever had. Back in my apartment later that night, I felt strangely at peace. The next day would mark the end of one journey and the beginning of another. Regardless of how my family responded, I had done something remarkable, and I knew it. Graduation morning arrived with clear skies and crisp air, as if the universe itself was offering its blessing. I woke up early, too filled with anticipation to sleep. This was more than a degree ceremony. This was closure. This was proof. My phone buzzed with a message from Lily. "Good morning, graduate. See you at the robing area. So proud to be walking beside you today." Simple. Genuine. A quiet sign of how far our relationship had come. We had once been two strangers living under the same roof, shaped by unequal treatment. Now somehow, we were becoming real sisters. After a light breakfast, I carefully dressed in the outfit I had saved up for: a new dress, understated yet elegant, and shoes I could walk in with confidence. When I fastened Grandma Eleanor's gifted stole around my neck, I paused to take it in. The words, the weight, the meaning. 4 years ago, I had been deemed unworthy of investment. Today wasn't just about graduating with honors, it was about standing tall with a thriving business and national recognition behind my name. The road here had been unforgiving, but the person I had become, stronger, sharper, and entirely self-made, was someone I never imagined I could be. Zoe insisted on giving me a ride. "Your chariot awaits, boss lady," she said with a wink as she opened the card. I smiled, but behind the joke, I saw genuine pride in her eyes. "No more bus rides today," she added. Campus was alive with energy. Families dressed in their best wandered between buildings, snapping photos and checking maps. At the student staging area, graduates in black robes huddled in small groups, fixing their caps and straightening honor cords. I saw Lily from across the courtyard, her blonde curls unmistakable in the crowd. She spotted me and ran over, pulling me into a sudden hug. "Can you believe we actually made it?" she said, brushing my cap into place. "Though I barely limped through and you basically took over the world," she added with a humility that still felt fresh and unfamiliar. "We both got here," I said calmly. "Just in our own way." Soon the ceremony staff began lining us up alphabetically. Lily and I would be walking close together. As we found our spots, I noticed Dean Rodriguez approaching. "Miss Wilson," she said, gently motioning for me to step aside. "Just confirming what we discussed. After degrees are awarded, the president will call you up for your speech." Then her voice softened. "We've planned a few extra recognitions. Nothing to worry about, but be ready for a little extra time in the spotlight." I asked for more details, but she just smiled knowingly. "Let it unfold, you've earned this." With that, the graduates began moving toward the auditorium, the familiar melody of pomp and circumstance echoing through the air. Through the tall glass windows, I could see the audience, thousands of family members and friends, filling every seat, their conversations and cheers filling the massive space. As we processed down the center aisle, I glanced toward the reserved seating. My parents were right up. Dad wore his navy suit, the one he only used for important meetings. Mom had on a loud floral dress with a matching hat that practically shouted how significant she thought the day was. Their eyes followed Lily with pride, smiling as she walked just ahead of me. But sitting beside them was Grandma Eleanor, graceful in a simple blue dress, her eyes locked entirely on me. When our gazes met, she gave me a small but powerful nod. It said everything. The ceremony opened with the usual messages about possibility, future goals and the impact of education. I barely registered them, busy rehearsing my speech silently and managing the nerves building in my chest. Then came the moment we had all waited for, the conferring of degrees. Each department rose one by one, with students crossing the stage to collect their diplomas and shake hands with the university leaders. When my name was called, I walked tall. From the crowd, Grandma Eleanor's distinct whistle pierced the polite applause. Lily gave me a thumbs up as we crossed paths, genuine and proud. Once all the graduates had received their diplomas, President Harlow returned to the microphone. "Before we conclude today's celebration, we have some special acknowledgments," he announced. "First, please welcome Emma Wilson from the School of Business, who will deliver this year's student address." As I stepped onto the stage, I noticed my parents watching me, really watching for the first time that day. Confusion flickered across their face. Clearly, this moment wasn't something they had anticipated. I took a deep breath, reached the podium, and began. 4 years ago, I came to Westfield with nothing but determination. I believed then, and still believe now, that education is something to be earned, not simply handed out. I went on to describe the long hours I worked, 30 every week, while keeping a full academic schedule, building a functioning business that now employed other students, and finishing my degree with top honor. I spoke about what it means to be resilient, how to grow through adversity, and how success isn't always what others define it to be. Without directly mentioning my family, I shared the pain of being underestimated, and the drive that comes from having something to prove. And then I said, the greatest lesson I learned at Westfield didn't come from a textbook. The most powerful lesson I had learned at Westfield was this: the limits others place on us don't have to become the limits we accept for ourselves. Each of us has the power to go beyond what's expected and shape our own definition of success. As I stepped back from the podium to the sound of resounding applause, President Harlow returned to center stage. What happened next would forever shift the dynamic within my family. "Thank you, Ms. Wilson, for that heartfelt and inspiring address," he began. "Now it is my distinct honor to present several recognitions that reflect the highest level of excellence here at Westfield." He paused, glancing at his notes with intention. "First, the faculty of the School of Business has unanimously selected Emma Wilson as this year's valedictorian, graduating with a flawless 4.0 GPA, while also founding and growing a business now valued in the six-figure range." A wave of murmurs and admiration moved through the audience. I stood still at the side of the stage, completely stunned. I hadn't expected any of this. But he wasn't finished. In addition, President Harlow continued, "Wilson is this year's champion of the National Collegiate Business Innovation Competition, which has brought remarkable recognition to Westfield's entrepreneurship program. The applause grew louder. I glanced toward the front row and saw my parents now watching me intently. Their faces were shifting from mild confusion to full-blown shock. But it wasn't over. "What many of you may not realize," President Harlow said, his voice ringing clear through the vast hall, "is that Ms. Wilson achieved all of this while funding her education entirely on her own. She worked multiple jobs, built a thriving business, and maintained academic excellence, all without a single dollar of financial support from her family." A ripple moved through the crowd. Parents looked at each other with raised eyebrows and hushed comments. Some wore expressions of surprise, others of respect. In recognition of her extraordinary journey, he continued, "We are pleased to announce that Ms. Wilson has accepted a position with Alexander Global Consulting, one of the top business strategy firms in the nation, and her story will be featured as the cover profile in next month's issue of Business Innovation magazine, under the headline, Rising Entrepreneurial Talent." The room exploded into a standing ovation. As applause thundered around me, I turned toward my parents and saw their faces pale. The realization was setting in. Everyone now knew they had ignored, dismissed, and refused to help the daughter being honored as the most exceptional graduate of the class. Lily stood among the graduates, clapping with everything she had. Tears streaked her cheeks, but she was. Grandma Eleanor remained seated, her body unable to rise quickly, but her face glowed with so much pride it felt like she alone lit the room. Once the crowd finally quieted, President Harlow stepped back to the mic. "In honor of Wilson's exceptional example," he announced, "the Board of Trustees has voted to establish the Emma Wilson Resilience Scholarship. This fund will support students who have shown extraordinary determination in the face of personal or financial hardship." And just like that, it was complete. I hadn't just triumphed in spite of my parents' neglect. I had turned their rejection into something powerful, something lasting. My name would now be tied to helping other students walk the same difficult road I had traveled. As I returned to my seat, applause still echoing, Lily reached over and gripped my hand tightly. "You're incredible," she said with conviction, "and they were completely shamefully wrong about you." The rest of the ceremony passed in a. After the final remarks, students and families scattered, trying to find one another in the crowd. Eventually I saw my parents standing with Grandma Eleanor, but their usual confidence had vanished, replaced by an awkward stillness. I was stopped multiple times on the way over by professors and peers congratulating me, so it took a while to reach them. When I finally did, my father spoke first, trying to keep his voice light. "Well, that was unexpected," he said, forcing a "You've certainly kept us in the dark, Emma." As if I had been hiding success instead of screaming for their attention all these years. There was a time when that kind of dismissiveness would have crushed me. Now, it barely touched me. Now their words barely registered. "Not really," I said calmly. "I've always been exactly who I am. You just chose not to see it." Before they could react, Lily stepped forward and wrapped her arm around my shoulders, standing firmly beside me. "Everyone's talking about Emma's speech and her accomplishments," she said loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Isn't it incredible what she pulled off without any help? Imagine how much more she might have done if she'd had the same support I." Our mother flinched at the public acknowledgement of their clear favoritism. Uncle Jack and several cousins standing nearby now looked at my parents with newly curious and judging eyes. "We can talk more about this later at home," Dad said stiffly, clearly wanting to end the conversation under the growing spotlight. "Actually," I replied, "I'm headed to a celebration with my mentors and my business team. They've been the ones who truly showed up for me these past 4 years. I wouldn't miss it for the world." At that moment, Grandma Eleanor stepped forward, taking my hand with her weathered fingers. "I'm coming too," she announced. "I want to meet the people who saw in you what your own parents failed to recognize." Her words hung heavy in the air. For the first time I saw something close to real regret flicker across my mother's face. "We are very proud of you, of course," she said in a soft, shaky voice. "Thank you," I replied, standing tall. "But I've come to understand something important. I don't need anyone's approval to succeed. Today isn't about finally earning your praise, it's about honoring the journey I walked alone." As Grandma Eleanor and I began to walk away, Lily hesitated only a moment before declaring, "I'm coming too." She stepped away from our parents and joined us. There we were, their 2 daughters, leaving them behind, both having grown beyond the boundaries they once tried to place on us. My parents stood still in the middle of a joyous crowd,
their image of who we were quietly falling apart. The atmosphere at the business school's celebration couldn't have been more different. Professor Bennett had put together a stunning reception for graduates, faculty, and invited industry leaders. Glass bowls filled with sparkling punch, elegant trays of hors d'oeuvres, and congratulatory signs gave the event a warm, vibrant energy. Lily's eyes widened as she looked around. "This is nothing like the political science reception," she whispered. "It feels like everyone here actually knows each other." I smiled. This department became my home. These people noticed me, even when my own parents did. Zoe appeared within seconds, throwing her arms around me in a hug that lifted me off the ground. Then she turned to Grandma Eleanor and Lily with a bright smile. "I've heard so much about both of you," she said warmly. The grandmother who never stopped believing, and the sister who finally opened her eyes. Lily blushed at the playful remark but took it with grace. "Better late than never, right?" she said. Just then Dean Rodriguez walked over holding champagne glasses. "There she is, the star of the day," she said, handing out glasses. "And this must be the grandmother we've all heard about. You raised a remarkable woman." As they spoke, I noticed Lily taking in the scene, the professors chatting with me like a colleague, the students who admired my work, the friends who had seen and supported my growth. It was a quiet, unmistakable contrast to the conditional praise we had grown up with. "Miss Wilson," a confident voice called out. I turned to see a poised woman in a sleek, tailored suit approaching. "I'm Jennifer Alexander," she said, extending her hand. "Founder of Alexander Global Consulting. Your competition pitch was outstanding. We're thrilled you're joining our team." "Thank you," I said, shaking her hand firmly. "I'm truly excited to be part of your company," she smiled warmly. "Your combination of academic achievement and hands-on business success is exactly what we look for. It's rare to meet someone so young who's already built something real." As she moved off to speak with another group, I noticed Lily staring at me, her face full of surprise. "You didn't mention you'd be working at Alexander Global," Lily said, clearly stunned. "That's one of the most elite consulting firms in the country." I gave a modest smile. "It all happened quickly after the competition. The pay must be good," she said after a beat. "Probably more than Dad." The reception moved forward with speeches from professors and award presentations. When Professor Bennett stood to present the Outstanding Entrepreneurship Award, she did so with watery eyes. She spoke about my evolution from a quiet freshman with big ideas, to a business owner who had become one of the department's shining stars. Throughout the event, I took time to introduce Grandma Eleanor to everyone who had played a role in my success: mentors, professors, classmates turned collaborators, and staff members who helped me navigate financial aid. Each person greeted her warmly and shared a personal story about a moment when I had stood out, helped someone, or gone beyond what was expected. "I had no clue," Lily whispered after the 10th such interaction. "All these people genuinely admire you." Midway through the afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Dinner's at 6 at the rental house. We'd love for you to join. We want to celebrate both our graduates." I showed the message to Lily and Grandma Eleanor. "What do you think?" Grandma Eleanor gave a short, dry laugh. "Bit late to start acting like proud parents now, don't you think?" Lily looked torn. "They're trying maybe, in their own flawed way. We don't have to decide yet," I said, slipping my phone away. "Let's just enjoy this moment." As the reception was winding down, Professor Bennett returned with a university photographer. "The business magazine would love a picture of you with your family for the article," she said. "Are they here?" There was a short silence. "My grandmother and sister are," I answered carefully. "My parents are elsewhere right now." She nodded slowly. "The family who shows up is the one that counts," she said gently. "Let's get a picture of you three." The photographer positioned us near the business school seat. Grandma Eleanor stood in the center, arms wrapped proudly around Lily and me, both in full regalia, my stole clearly visible in the frame. As we prepared to leave, Dean Rodriguez approached and handed me a business card. "The Dean of Admissions at our MBA program wanted you to have this," she said. "They're eager to discuss a full-ride scholarship, if you're interested in graduate school while working." The doors continuing to open for me now stood in sharp contrast to the narrow expectations my parents had once imposed. Back in the car, I asked quietly, "Should we go to the family dinner?" Grandma Eleanor took my hand gently. "That choice is yours, my love. You don't owe them a thing." Then she paused. "But maybe there's value in letting them see what you've become. Not for them, for you," Lily chimed in. "Also, I'd really love to watch Uncle Jack ask why they never mentioned your job or awards to anyone. That sealed. We drove to the rented house where the rest of the family had gathered. As we walked in, the room fell briefly silent before erupting in cheerful greetings and warm congratulations. Both Lily and I were hugged and celebrated. Mom emerged from the kitchen. Her earlier confident tone had shifted. She now looked slightly nervous. "You came," she said, smiling in a way that didn't quite feel natural. "We were just setting the table." Dad walked over with exaggerated cheer. "Here are my successful daughters," he announced loudly, as if he had been broadcasting my accomplishments all along. He turned to me with a grin. "Emma, why didn't you tell us you landed such a major consulting job?" The sheer gall of that question, after years of disinterest and dismissal, left me speechless for a moment. Before I could respond, Uncle Jack cut in sharply. "Probably because you haven't asked her about her goals even once in 4 years, Robert. At least not at any family event I've been to." A heavy silence followed. Dad's face reddened, whether from shame or irritation. It was hard to tell. "We've supported both our daughters equally," he said, sounding defensive. "Financially?" Aunt Susan asked, raising an eyebrow. "Because if the university president's speech was accurate, Emma paid her own way while building a company." My mother quickly stepped in. "We had limited resources," she said, "and we had to make difficult choices. Emma was always so independent because she had no other option." Grandma Eleanor interrupted sharply. "Let's not rewrite the past now that her success is inconvenient for your story." A heavy silence filled the room. Cousins exchanged uneasy looks, and my parents visibly struggled to stay composed under this rare public accountability. Then Lily spoke, her voice firm and clear. "Mom, Dad, it's time to face the truth. You favored me. From the beginning, you poured everything into me and left Emma to fend for herself. You underestimated her, and now everyone here sees that." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but whether they came from regret or sheer discomfort, I couldn't tell. "We didn't mean to," she began softly. "Intent isn't what matters," I said, my tone even. "Your decisions shaped my life, regardless of what you thought you were doing." My father, unaccustomed to having his authority challenged, tried to take back control. "This isn't the time to air family grievances," he said stiffly. "We're here to celebrate." "Yes," Aunt Susan said dryly, "to celebrate Emma's incredible accomplishments, achieved entirely without your support. Seems like the perfect time, doesn't it?" Dinner resumed, though the mood had clearly shifted. Relatives who had once taken my parents' version of events at face value were now looking at me with new respect. They asked questions about my career, my company, and my future plans. With every answer I gave, the discomfort on my parents' faces grew. It was clear now, everything they had dismissed had become undeniable. By dessert, the balance of power in the room had changed. The people who once sat at the head of the table with unquestioned influence were now being quietly challenged. The daughter they had overlooked had surpassed every expectation, and the cracks in their authority showed. As the night wound down and extended family began saying their goodbyes, many offered hugs, warm congratulations, and even business referrals. Their support, though delayed, felt deeply validating. Once it was just us, my parents, Lily, Grandma Eleanor, and me. Dad cleared his throat. "Emma, your mother and I talked," he began. "We'd like to help with a security deposit for your new place. A small gift for graduation." The gesture, once something I would have cherished, now felt almost insulting. I replied steadily, "Thank you, but I won't be needing that. I've accepted a position at Alexander Global. Starting salary is $90,000 plus bonuses. My housing is already taken care of." The number hit like a slap. I watched his face shift from disbelief to stunned realization, and finally to something like reluctant respect. "Well," he managed, forcing composure, "you've certainly shown what you're capable of." "I have," I answered quietly, though I never needed to prove it to anyone but myself. As we began to leave, Lily caught my arm. "I'm staying at Grandma Eleanor's place for a few days before moving into my new place," she said. "Want to come? A little family trip with the people who actually matter." The simple offer struck me deeply. "I'd love to," I whispered, emotion tightening my throat. As we walked out, leaving my parents standing in the doorway of their rented show home, I felt something lift, something that had weighed me down for most of my life. Their approval, once so desperately sought, no longer held power over me. The family I was building, Eleanor, Lily, Zoe, and every mentor and friend who had believed in me, had always seen my worth. And that was the only validation I would ever need. That kind of recognition, pure, earned and unwavering, meant far more to me than the delayed approval of those who had once refused to see my worth. The weeks after graduation passed in a blur of transition.
I moved into a bright, comfortable apartment, just a short walk from the Alexander Global office, using part of my competition prize money to cover the deposit and furnish the space. Meanwhile, my small business continued to thrive, now run by my student team, whom I had formally hired with fair pay and schedules that respected their academic needs. Then the magazine article went live. There, in glossy print, was a photo of me, standing between Lily and Grandma Eleanor on graduation day. The story traced my path from financially unsupported student to award-winning entrepreneur and newly hired consultant, spotlighting perseverance through adversity. I mailed copies to Professor Bennett, Dean Rodriguez, and every mentor who had walked with me. And then, surprisingly, came a message from my parents. 2 weeks after graduation, they invited me to lunch at a neutral cafe, something public, perhaps to keep the emotions in check. The meeting was awkward, but for the first time, it felt like a real attempt at something honest. "We've been thinking a lot," my mother began, choosing her words with care, "about our choices and the assumptions we made." My father, always less comfortable with vulnerability, followed in a stiffer tone, "We may have underestimated what you were capable of." The irony of that understatement wasn't lost on me, but still I recognized the effort. "Yes," I replied quietly. "You did." "We'd like to rebuild our relationship," my mom continued. "If you're open to it." I paused. The part of me still carrying old wounds wanted to reject the offer outright, to make them feel even a fraction of the hurt I had endured. But the woman I had become knew better. Continuing that cycle would only cause more damage. "I'm willing to start fresh," I said at last. "But it would have to be exactly that, new, based on who I really am now, not on who you wanted me to be." My father nodded slowly. "That's fair." His usual assertiveness had faded. "And part of that," I added, "means acknowledging this wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was favoritism, and it caused real harm." They exchanged a tense glance. Then finally, my mother spoke. "We did favor Lily," she admitted softly. "She fit the version of success we understood. You didn't. That was our failure, and it hurt you more than we ever realized." "I'm sorry, Emma. Truly." Her apology, though not perfect, was more sincere than I had expected. It didn't fix everything, but it cracked the door open. Over the summer, I settled into my role at Alexander Global. I stayed in regular touch with Grandma Eleanor and Lily. Lily, now working at an entry-level role with a nonprofit focused on education access, seemed At one of our weekly dinners, she admitted, "I keep thinking about how different our lives were, and how many students go through what you did, but without your willpower." Her growing empathy and social awareness moved me more than any apology ever could. She was growing past the golden child mold, finally becoming someone with depth, compassion, and purpose. By autumn, I had found my rhythm, balancing my consulting role with overseeing the digital agency, now expanding under the guidance of its student-led team. My first performance review at Alexander Global earned glowing praise, and a performance bonus that finally gave me a sense of true financial peace. The kind of stability I had once dreamed of was now my everyday reality. One weekend, while visiting Grandma Eleanor at her peaceful lakeside cottage, we sat watching the sky melt into gold over the water. She handed me a small wooden box with a soft smile. "I've been saving this," she said, "waiting for the right time." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. "My grandmother gave it to me when I graduated," she explained. "She told me to always remember a woman's worth is something internal. It doesn't come from what others think, it comes from knowing yourself." I've kept it all these years for the granddaughter who would truly understand what it means, Grandma Eleanor said as she clasped the bracelet gently around my wrist. Then she looked at me with that familiar, steady gaze. "Your road has been far harder than it ever should have been, Emma. But who you've become through it, this strong, remarkable woman, is someone no easier path could have ever produced." Her words put into focus something I had felt but couldn't quite name. The injustices I faced hadn't been right, but the strength, wisdom, and clarity born from them were now part of who I was. On the 1-year anniversary of graduation, I used savings and profits from my business to establish a new scholarship at Westfield University, the First Generation Achievement Award. Unlike traditional merit-based awards, this fund was meant for students who had overcome personal and financial hardships to get to college in the first place. When selecting recipients, I told the committee, consider not just where a student stands, but what they've overcome to get there. The first award went to a young woman working 2 jobs, studying accounting, and raising her younger siblings. She reminded me powerfully of myself, but this time, she would have the support I never had. My parents, who had gradually begun rebuilding trust through steady effort, attended the scholarship ceremony. As I spoke about creating access and building ladders for others to climb, I noticed a different expression on their faces. This wasn't just regret, it looked like true pride, genuine, quiet, and not driven by comparison. "You've done something incredible," my father said afterward. It was the closest he had ever come to sincere praise. Mom followed, her voice softer but certain. "You've turned your pain into purpose. That's rare and beautiful." Those words did matter, but not nearly as much as what I had come to learn. The lesson wasn't about waiting for approval, it was about never needing it in the first place. Their validation didn't change who I was, it only confirmed what I had always known. Lily and I kept deepening our relationship, away from the rivalry and favoritism that had defined our early years. During a quiet hike one Saturday, she asked what had clearly been on her mind for a long time. "Do you think you'll ever fully forgive them?" I thought about it as we reached the overlook, the horizon stretching endlessly before us. "Forgiveness isn't a single decision," I said at last. "It's a process, a gradual release of the idea that things could have happened different. I don't think I'll ever forget what it felt like to be told I wasn't worth the investment," I added, "but I'm trying not to let that define how I see them now. That's where I'm at for now." Lily nodded slowly. "Well, for what it's worth, their biggest loss was never knowing who you really were." As I stood there staring at the vast sky above us, I thought about the long road I'd walked from the girl whose parents told her she didn't deserve a future, to the woman building those futures for others. The transformation wasn't just in my achievements, it was in how I viewed myself. The greatest victory hadn't been proving my parents wrong, though there was a unique satisfaction in that. The deeper win was understanding that their judgment never defined me in the first place. I had always been worthy, always capable, always deserving of belief and investment. They simply lacked the vision to see it, and maybe that's the truth so many of us need to hear. Your value doesn't change based on who sees it. The people who underestimate you, they're just revealing their own limitations, not yours. Being underestimated became my secret weapon. It forced me to build inner strength, sharp instincts, and relentless drive, traits that carried me well beyond what anyone imagined. The very things my parents failed to nurture had become the foundation of everything they failed to envision. Not because I wasn't capable, but because their imagination was too small to contain what I could become. Have you ever been overlooked by someone who acted like your worth didn't exist? How did you find the strength to prove them wrong, or better yet, prove your worth to yourself? Share your story in the comments. And if my journey resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Because sometimes the people who believe in you the least are the ones who unknowingly push you the farthest. Not to earn their validation, but to show yourself just how far beyond their limited vision you were always meant to go. Thank you for being part of this journey. I hope it inspires you to believe in your own worth, no matter who fails to.